So the primary sales point for Hoist is that the vast majority of their equipment mechanically includes movement of the body. Realize that it's the linkage system within the machine that alters the position of the back pad, in this case, i.e. the body. It's not what she's doing that changes, not even remotely. If we move the footplate by itself, this back pad is going to go. So what really happens? Well, think about your normal plate translating leg press. Here would be the angle. Can you see can you see my hand here? So here's her back pad angle, or her trunk angle. And right now, let's call that her hip angle. Is that visible? Okay. Normally what would happen is she would take her knees near straight, which would change her hip angle, let's say that much, if the back pad didn't move. What you're going to see happen here is really not that magical and not that complicated if you start to recognize that if this is the angle she could achieve on the regular leg press, that same angle will occur when she straightens, but as the back pad moves, it's just going to be mysteriously and magically occurring at a different place in space. So instead of being from folded up at the hip here to this hip position when her legs are straight, as her legs straighten this time, her back is going to move backwards. Now how much change occurs here is obviously due to the mechanics they chose with that angle. So take a look, envision that if she could straighten her leg, in fact, I want to do something, see if this works. You may think I'm crazy here, but if her foot was right here and she straightened out with no back pad movement, there's an angle. I'm going to get you to do this for a second. I don't know if you guys can see with the black machine upholstery and all this stuff, but here's her current angle. Done this remotely accurate, which is always questionable. And now she performs the action of the machine all the way. That angle's not any different. Nothing changed here in terms of motion. There was no magic in the fact her top part moved. The difference was instead of all the movement coming from the feet going that way, some of it, yeah, do a couple more. The same relationships were created earlier in the excursion of that because this moved also. Now you're going to hear from the sales reps and the marketing people that that is magical and different on the joints. The problem is your joints can't possibly know that occurred. They only know what happens inside of themselves. So I hope that makes sense. Maybe it's worth reviewing. That doesn't necessarily change any of your setup on the machine, but it also makes it less mysterious. So as a professional, you can better represent this as, to the client, this is a cool leg press. There's nothing magic about it. Let's see if it works okay for you. Okay, let's look at the pulley system in this Hoist leg press. From the weight stack, follow up to a simple redirect. It doesn't move in space, just spins. Comes down through the frame back here. And if I can get around behind, you'll see that after a second redirect within here, the cable's coming out, redirected around a third pulley that doesn't move in space, and comes over to this pulley. And then from there, goes back through the frame and up and around, and finally engages into the mechanism, okay? Everything thus far, top, bottom, four pulleys to get back to this place. And then, if we move the machine, here's what you'll see. Redirect, redirect, a moving pulley. So we've got a doubler here. Because of the system, the relationship, you'll need to go back and review those if you don't understand doublers. So redirect, redirect, and a doubler, because if there was 100 pounds here, there would also be 100 pounds here after it goes around, and both of those will be pulling on this portion of the frame that's moving. Now, after another redirect or two, the cable finally anchors into another portion of the moving articulating frame or linkage there, right? Do you see that? So really, if there was 100 here from the weight stack, 200, 300, in terms of what's pulling on this part, keep moving it, I'm going to scoot back, in terms of what's pulling on this part of the machine. Now that does not mean it translates into 3 times the load once we get up to here, where we put our feet on the foot plate. The distance from the primary pivot point of the foot plate, not just the entire 4-bar linkage, but from here up to here, that creates some mechanical advantage, and that's part of the reason this has been increased so much, is because of our wheelbarrow type of leverage or mechanical advantage back here at the foot plate. All right, this part of the analysis is going to be based upon where the person positions the seat, or where you choose to position the seat. The reason that's going to be important is going to become clearly quite obvious. Think about this before I start though. Typically we position the seat based upon more of the person's anatomical features and abilities to bend. So someone typically we would think taller or even shorter with less ability to flex their knees and hips, we might put the seat further back. That's logical, right? And we would make that decision purely based upon those 2 factors. Someone shorter or able to bend more, flex the knees and hips, has less mass in here that can get in the way, which is an issue for a lot of people. We might be able to put them up really close. That might be the only reason we do that. But what I want you to see is that on the hoist equipment, where we position the person on a great number of these pieces influences the actual load, basically negating any of the numbers on the weight stack, all right? So we've got her all the way, it's all the way forward, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're gonna look at the scale. I'm gonna look at the scale. I know you can't see the scale, but is it zeroed out? There, it's only fair to zero it out, no cheating here. As I pull her right off the starting blocks, basically, okay. You got to pull in the line through which she'd be shoving to be consistent with her effort. I've got 122 pounds. That might change ever so slightly if I pulled up higher, if I pulled down lower. So we've got to be relatively consistent to her potential shove in this case. Now, what I'd like for you to see, while she may not be able to push the machine as far as I'm going to pull it, what we're trying to see is what the machine can actually offer. Then you can, based on that, make decisions for the individual. But we've got to see the full scope of the machine. So, zeroed out. I'm going to come out here, and we're getting close to the end of this thing. Hold 54 pounds. So we went from 100 and, what did I say, 22 to 54. So we lost, I'm not a calculator in my head, so let's say we lost between 50 and 60%. This is only 40% of the original load when we're out here. Hopefully you've looked at the portion on strength profiles and you recognize as we go from a flexed or bent or folded up position, the straighter we get with this direction of resistance going virtually through the legs between the knee and the hip, you're getting stronger. So we've got a magnitude that's reducing while the moment arm of resistance is reducing, which is what makes you structurally strong out here. That's interesting because usually if you were in the gym and you got stronger on a dumbbell exercise or a barbell exercise, what would you do as you got stronger in general? You'd put more weight on. Well, consider the same idea in matching resistance profiles to strength profiles. At a portion in the range where you can do twice as much weight, but you have the same torque of resistance, you're not doing as much work as you could. In essence, like getting stronger on a barbell press and not going up in load. Well, this adds insult to injury in that case because it not only are you getting stronger out here, it's actually reducing in magnitude of resistance. So by the time, depending on the stroke she can perform, length of her legs, how folded up she is, she's going to lose some, probably not as much as I just showed you the machine goes through in terms of an excursion and a loss. And that's really interesting. One other thing I want to show you here is placement on the foot plate changes things as well. Now normally we would think that the higher up you go, the more leverage you would have. Like longer handles on a wheelbarrow type of idea, okay? Well, anything with a 4-bar linkage that is intentionally creating a pivot in the foot plate that is actually tilting back towards her while I'm pushing harder in the foot plate it's not just the load that I'm fighting. It's the attempted movement due to the 4-bar linkage and its relationship. So if I go back to the start here, what was 122 from this position, and if we ignored all the physics of the 4-bar linkage, we would assume, well, up here is going to be a little lighter. Ironically, or not so ironically, if you understand a 4-bar linkage, up here it's 124. So this little bit right here didn't make much difference, but the higher we put the feet compared to the lower, there's going to be less resistance here and more resistance here. So pretty much if depending on the person, if you can line them up closer to pushing through this main frame, this main axis, that might make a significant difference. Now what I'm going to have her do, I'm going to go back down to this one. Can you move the seat all the way back for me? And again, she might not do that. She might not even be able to use the machine back here at all. But let's see what the machine offers from this seat setting. Before we had 122 at the start, now we have 78. So someone that's further back, without any additional load from the weight stack, is moving less weight as influenced by their body weight and its position and seat position. Does that make sense? So let's see what happens with her all the way back while starting at 78, 0. If I come out to about the same excursion as most I can tell, we've got 18. So again, all those factors, we went from, what I say, 78, I can't remember anything, to 18. Roughly from 80 to less than 20. So we have less than 25% of the original starting resistance at a position where you are headed towards infinitely strong. So that's an interesting feature here. I think the moral of the story is not use or don't use the machine. It's for us to recognize that it has a very limited scope of challenge. It is always where they're folded up. That is going to be the primary challenge on this machine. And their body weight and seat position settings that to some degree you decide are going to make it so you have absolutely no idea how much weight's on there. We would like to assume that if I've got a bigger, longer person, taller person, and I put the seat back, oh, I'm going to add some weight because they're stronger. You might have the exact same weight as a shorter, relatively heavy person that's up close, because we lost it in terms of the mechanical advantage of the machine. So adding it might just have brought it back. That's the deception of a weight stack relative to the mechanics of the machine. That is important to come to understand as a trainer. That's why these numbers mean nothing. It is more about the tolerance and abilities of the individual. That's a key theme of everything we're going to look at with anybody. The thing I wanted to try to show you from this angle that we probably couldn't see as well or at all from the wide shot, she again has got the seat all the way forward, and I want you to recognize its distance. Here's the center of her seat, her bottom. Here's where she's going to pivot. So will you go through that motion for us? So you can kind of see what happens there. Now go back down and let's put the seat all the way back. Now you may not be able to reach the footplate much there. Maybe put your feet all the way down and we can get some excursion. So, but you can probably still see that as she pushes, we're still pivoting here, but look where she is relative to this footplate. Relative to this axis. So her weight being more over the axis, she has less leverage influence on it. So that's why, if you're curious, why does it make that much difference? That's hopefully a little glimpse into how the seat setting alters the load. And it's far from the only thing that alters the profile and the absolute resistance that's offered through the machine.